With some technology hiccups in worship this morning, I'm recording our sermon again for those who may not have been able to hear it, joining us on live stream or Facebook earlier today. My children had a book when they were younger called You're All My Favorites. The story is about a papa bear putting his 3 little baby bears to bed. And as he's putting them to bed, I believe it's the middle bear, as middle children are apt to do, stops her father and says to him, "Papa, who is your favorite baby bear?" And the father responds to her in a kindly way, saying, "You're all my favorites." But then he elaborates and he explains to the little middle bear, "You are my favorite middle nut brown bear. And your sister is my favorite baby bear, and your brother is my favorite big brother bear. You are all my favorites, each in their own way." Often, I think, when we read today's gospel text, we read it with that kind of question in mind. We're wanting to know, who is Jesus's favorite? Is Mary Jesus's favorite? It sure seems like maybe she may be. Or is Martha Jesus's favorite? When we ask that question, what we're really asking is, am I your favorite, Lord? Is the work that I do, the way that I engage ministry, is how I approach you the better task? In the words of Jesus from today's gospel text. But I think that when we ask those questions, we're really going about approaching the text all wrong. Because after all, Jesus is not a parent. Had he been a parent, he would have known better than to name anyone as favorites. Jesus, though, even as a teacher, I don't think is really intending to tell us that Mary or Martha is his favorite. Instead, he responds to Martha's question by uplifting the uniqueness of each sister, just like Papa Bear does in the story. Martha has her own gifts to offer, and Mary has her gifts. Mary has chosen the better task for herself. But Jesus never criticizes Martha. Jesus never says that the tasks in which Martha is engaged in are inappropriate or not good. In fact, quite the opposite. If we take a step back and appreciate who Martha and Mary really are, we begin to see that Jesus has already affirmed Martha. Jesus has already celebrated the ways in which Martha is blessed and is blessing others through her welcome of Jesus into her home. Although Luke doesn't tell us a whole lot about these sisters, the very fact that Martha has a home, that it isn't her husband's home or her father's home or somebody else's home into which she welcomes Jesus, but it is her home, suggests to us a couple of things. First of all, in the first century patriarchal world in which she lived, this means that Martha was most likely either an orphan or a widow. Somebody without any other male relatives who could have inherited the property when the man who probably held the property before her passed away. Now, before you stop me and say, but we all know that Martha couldn't possibly have had no brothers to inherit her father's home, because we've heard the story of Lazarus. Remember that this is John's gospel where we meet Lazarus. And today's story comes from Luke's gospel account. Although there may be some reasons to think that the Mary and Martha in these two texts may have had some relationship to one another in the later Christian world, we can't know for sure. And it's entirely possible that these sisters are an entirely different family than the one that we learn about in John's gospel. In any case, whether it's her father's home and she had no brother to inherit, or her husband's home and she had no sons to inherit, Martha is now the owner, the householder of a home where it would seem her younger sister Mary resides. And so we know not only that Martha is a householder, but also that Martha is somebody who gets things done. She has, in the midst of whatever loss that she suffered, been able to care not only for herself, but also for her younger sister, Mary. And she's been able to do so well for the two of them that they are in a position with resources to spare in order to welcome Jesus and his disciples into their home when he comes to their town. Martha is somebody who gets things done, but not just that. She gets the right things done. When Jesus, in a chapter earlier in Luke's gospel that we read a few weeks ago here, I think, talks about what it means for his disciples to go out on their own and prepare the way for him in the various villages and cities along the route to Jerusalem. He tells them that they should enter the first home that they come to. And if the householder, if the owner of that house welcomes them, they should stay in that house. And the peace of God will be on that house, on that person who welcomes them. This is Martha. Martha welcomes Jesus and his disciples, and so has already received the peace of God, received God's blessing by choosing to accept, welcome, and make space in her life, in her home, for Jesus and his followers, so that they can begin to proclaim the realm of God, which now Mary sits at Jesus's feet and listens to. Martha isn't confused. Martha has not lost her way. Martha is a woman with much to bear on her shoulders, who in the midst of all of it has chosen to welcome Jesus in her life. So then what about Mary? Mary is the younger sister. She doesn't have the same responsibility for the household that Martha does, although certainly she would have had chores and expectations that should have been done to serve and care for the household that she shares with her sister. But without the same expectations, without the burden of being the householder, the one who welcomes Jesus, Mary has a bit more freedom as well. And so she chooses to use that freedom to sit at Jesus's feet and listen. Imagine for a moment with me the kind of risk involved in that choice. For a young girl, probably not yet married, and so somewhere under the age of 15, maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, who is at the mercy of her sister, to choose to disobey her sister, to leave her sister to do the chores while Mary sits at Jesus's feet instead. It's a choice, to be sure, but a risky one. And yet Mary feels called to sit and listen to Jesus. When the microphones were working better this morning, you had the opportunity to hear all of the wonderful things that we are doing together as a community of Good Samaritans in this place. The ways in which our social justice team is at work in our community, in the larger Indianapolis city, in the larger state of Indiana, to advocate for justice, peace, and hope. You've heard about the meals that we're planning and sharing with one another and with others in our community, the picnic that we're going to share as a church community in just a couple of weeks, the fellowship events, the ways in which we serve, from being chalice bearers to acolytes to preachers. All of these are different moments, different ways in which we can connect and be in service to God. I told you that as a parent, I figured out pretty early not to choose favorites among my children. Like the Papa Bear in the story, I encourage my children and assure them that they are all my favorites. But as they've gotten older, the kids have gotten a little smarter. And so they try to ask about particularities. They say, well, they play different instruments. And so they'll say, well, what's your favorite instrument? Or in the years that they've played different sports, they'll ask, well, do you like gymnastics or soccer better? What's your favorite? An attempt to try to figure out, to discern what really is where my interests lay. But the truth is that our oldest daughter is my favorite high school violinist. Our middle child is my favorite harpist. And our youngest son is my favorite young violinist, my favorite little pianist. All of these different ways in which they have, as individuals, chosen to express themselves could not have been better suited to them in who they are in these moments in their lives. And the same is true with Mary and Martha. Martha chooses to serve God by welcoming Jesus into her home. And for that, she is rewarded and celebrated with the peace of God. Mary chooses a different route. She chooses to serve God as a student and a disciple who sits at the feet of Jesus. And for that, she is rewarded and celebrated, and Jesus will not take that from her. The emphasis in the gospel text today, I don't think, ought to be on better or best. It shouldn't be on whose is the favorite role. In fact, some Greek scholars even debate whether Jesus says that only one thing is necessary or only a few things are necessary. And in any case, Jesus never clarifies what that one thing or what those few things might be. Instead, I think that what is clear in the gospel is that the thing that is necessary, the things that are necessary, are the orientation toward Jesus, towards God, towards love and peace and justice. However one achieves that, whether we do it by playing the violin or the harp, whether we do it by serving meals, by standing in worship, by serving as a member of the social justice team, all of these, when oriented towards Jesus, when done for the sake of the realm of God, are indeed the best part for each one of us, who we are in this moment in time. Thanks be to God. Amen.